and safety of staff, officials, and the general public. SWAT members will not be physically in attendance, but will be available via video conference. That piece of information is at the front of the agenda. And we're going, as I said, I think we'll move towards having that maybe videotape the way some other bodies do. So we're convened the meeting, and we'd like to have everyone self-introduce. We have just enough a number of people that should be relatively easy. And welcome, Councilmember Worth. So I'm going to go in the direction of my screen. And so Lisa, you will be first.
All right, very good. Lisa Bobadilla, Santa Ramon staff.
Karen.
Karen Stifford, Danville Council.
Andy.
Hello, everyone. Andy Dillard, Town of Danville staff.
Dave.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dave Fong, and I'm Danville Town Council.
There you go. And the other Dave.
Am I Dave?
Better than that, Teresa.
Mayor Hudson is here.
San Ramon.
Thank you. Renata.
This Renata or the other Renata?
Yeah, the other.
Renata Saws, council member, Town of Moraga.
Thank you. Darlene.
Darlene Amaral, SWAT TDM staff.
Robert.
Robert Sarmiento, Contra Costa County staff.
Thank you. Matt.
Hi, Matt Kelly, Contra Costa Transportation Authority staff.
Supervisor.
I'm Candace Anderson, representing Contra Costa County.
And John, and if there are multiple Johns, CCTA John.
John Huang, CCTA staff.
Thank you. David.
I'm David Early, and I'm a planning consultant to CCTA, here to talk about the VMT and growth management program.
Great, thank you. Amy.
Amy Worth, representing the city of Orinda.
Melody.
Hi, Melody Reeves with County Connection.
Thank you. Mike.
Mike Moran, City of Lafayette staff.
Thank you. Colin.
Hi there, Colin Clark with CCTA Planning, here for the East Bay Regional Parks agenda item today.
Thank you. Jason.
Hi, Jason Chan, City of Orinda staff.
Thank you. Ruby.
Florida County Connection.
Robin.
City of San Ramon, here to talk about the overcrossing.
Great, thank you. And making sure, so let's see, Brett.
Brett Swain, Town of Moraga staff.
Thank you. Katie.
Katie Hornbeck, from East Bay Regional Park District, here with Colin with his item.
Thank you. And Jennifer.
Hi, Jennifer Paul, City of Lafayette, just listening in.
Thank you. So welcome everyone, and thank you for going through the self-introduction. And our next item on the agenda is for public comment, and we invite members of the public to address the committee on any item, regarding any item that's not listed on our agenda. Do we have any public comment? I don't see any hands up or waving, so we will move on. Do any board members have comment? Again, seeing no hands, either virtual or waving. We will move on to administrative items. Darlene or Lisa, do you have any administrative items?
Yes, we do, Madam Chair. So on the regular agenda, item 6.C will be moved to 6.A. So that means Matt's presentation would go first, and then the rest of the presentations will still just follow.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to item number 5, the consent calendar. There's one item on there if anybody wants to remove it, or may we have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Also move, Candace.
Thank you. So moved by Supervisor Anderson, seconded by Councilmember Worth. Darlene, will you take a roll call vote?
Yes, I will. All righty. SWAT Committee Member Sauce,
Yes.
SWAT Committee Member Worth,
Aye.
SWAT Committee Member Hudson,
Yes.
SWAT Committee Member Anderson,
Aye.
Vice Chair Stepper,
Sorry, aye.
thank you, and then Chair Geringer.
Aye.
Okay.
So that consent calendar passes. So moving on to regular agenda items, and thank you to others in the rotation for letting that adjustment to the agenda take place. So we will hear agenda item 6C, the update and proposed revisions to the CCTA Growth Management Program Implementation Guide.
Thank you, Chair Geringer. This is Matt Kelly with CCTA. I'm here with David Early from PlaceWorks Consulting Firm. They are CCTA's on-call consulting firm for the planning department. We were here a few months ago to give you an update on where we were at with changes to the growth management program, all kind of resulting from changes to state law and CEQA due to the passage of Senate Bill 743. I think there's at least one new member or one member who's not on CCTA board in the room. So I'll give a little bit of background on the GMP and why we're here. So the growth management program is part of Measure J. It is something that all the cities must be, and all jurisdictions, including the towns, cities, and county, must be in compliance with in order to receive their return to source funding, which is 18% of the proceeds or revenues from Measure J are spread amongst the jurisdictions. And the mechanism for getting that is submitting your annual Measure J GMP compliance checklists. And what we're doing today is updating the implementation guide for the growth management program. And it really spells out those requirements at the policy level and how jurisdictions stay in compliance with the GMP. There's also a technical companion that dictates how your consultants and staff do traffic impact studies, things like that. But we're kind of focused on the policy level stuff today. So that being said, I'm going to hand it off to David Early from PlaceWorks, who's going to walk you through the changes we are proposing to make to the growth management program implementation guide. And a lot of it focuses on the action plans for routes of regional significance. You are the lucky RTPC in that you have 2 action plans in your RTPC. You're special, so this should be doubly important for you today. So I'll pass it on to David, and he can walk you through the changes. And also,
All right.
I would like to thank staff and commissioners for allowing us to go early today.
Yeah, and I too want to thank you for taking our item today at all and for taking us first on your agenda. Matt and I have done this presentation several times over the past weeks, and he has always projected the presentation. I just got a message saying maybe I would do it, but Matt, are you able to do it?
Okay,
Great.
good. All right. Thank you.
So Matt is going to be sharing his screen here, and it's a 2-part presentation. I'll be doing most of it, giving you an overview of the implementation guide, and then Matt will follow up at the very end with 1 slide on next steps, and then we'll be available for any questions you have. And I want to say in advance that this is a little bit in the weeds about transportation policy implementation. I'll try and keep it at the sort of the macro level, and I apologize in advance if we get down deeper than some of you might have hoped for. I'm going to start just by reminding you that CCTA has retained PlaceWorks, and we've been working together now for about 3 years, and we've been, I think, making really great progress in modernizing CCTA's already excellent procedures to bring them up to date with some recent changes in state law and with some overall practices in planning. And so on the state law side, certainly the most important one is the implementation of SB 743, which requires jurisdictions to no longer use delay or level of service as an impact measure in an environmental impact report or other CEQA document, and instead requires the use of vehicle miles traveled. And I'm sure many of you are already familiar with that set of changes, and we've been working on that to implement that and help your local jurisdictions to implement that over the last couple of years. We've also noted a change in the overall emphasis in transportation planning, and I know all of you are familiar with this as well, that when Measure J, previously Measure C, was first enacted by the voters, it really focused only on roadways and on regional roadways in particular. And over time, we've come to see more of an expansion, and you see the list here on the screen, where it's not only #1 regional roadways, but now other networks, the regional bicycle and pedestrian network, the regional transit network, and other non-network items in transportation planning that include safety and equity and climate change. And today I'm here to talk to you about the changes to the draft implementation guide that will ask you, as you develop your next round of action plans, and you, as Matt said, you have 2 action plans for each of your 2 sub-regions, if you will. Those 2 action plans will no longer cover only regional roadways. I know they've already been expanded in a couple of cases to cover the bicycle network and the transit network. We're going to ask you to more consciously cover those 2 networks as well, so a total of 3 sets of networks. And we're going to ask you to cover safety, equity, and climate change. And on top of that, you'll still be able to add other items into your action plans at your discretion. You will also continue to have discretion to establish the metrics within the action plan, that is what things you're trying to measure. You will have it at your discretion to set the goals for each metric, that is what are the levels of improvement or maintenance of issues that you want to achieve. And then finally, you have the discretion to set the actions that you're going to take to try and achieve those goals. That's how the action plan process works today. That will remain unchanged. But the big change here is that we're moving from 1 required topic now to these 6 required topics. Let's go on to the next slide. So on the modal side, the 3 different transportation networks or modes, the process will remain exactly the same. It's always been the case with regional roadways, and it now will be the case with all 3 networks, that your first job will be to designate and map the routes of regional significance for each of these networks. You've already been doing that for roadways, and you'll do it now for all 3 networks. Your next step will be that you will consult with the other RTPCs adjacent to you regarding any identified network items, network facilities that run outside of your area into another area. So certainly there are many of these, Pleasant Hill Road, the interstate freeways, Highway 24 and so forth. You will consult with your adjacent RTPCs to talk about those and what standards to set for them. And then it will be up to you, as I said already, to establish your goals, the measurement, the goals you're trying to achieve, which we call regional transportation objectives, the measurement methods, and actions to achieve those RTOs for each identified facility. That's exactly the same process you've already had. You're going to move now to doing that for 3 items and 3 facilities instead of just 1. And then on the non-modal side, we're not going to ask you to look at those in terms of individual facilities, like a particular roadway or bikeway, but we are going to ask you to think about equity, safety, and climate change at a sub-regional level, and trying to set goals and then actions to achieve those goals regarding equity in transportation, regarding safety in transportation, and regarding the ways that transportation affects climate change. Next slide. So the rest of this is a little bit really in the weeds of what's in the implementation guide, and some of you may never have to, thank goodness, may never have to review that document. But let me tell you quickly that in Chapter 3, we have refined the action plan process. We've created a new diagram that you see here that explains exactly how the action plans are prepared. Of course, your staff will be doing that both at the RTPC level, working with city and town staff and CCTA staff. And then the final document will come to you for both input and review. But it will be looking at all 6 of those kinds of goals and objectives that I already mentioned. So that's what Chapter 3 does. If we can have the next slide. Chapter 4 gives additional information about evaluating impacts of projects that may not be yet consistent with an action plan or with the growth management plan. These are both major projects and general plan amendments. I know that the City of Lafayette is going through a similar process right now, so some of you are probably familiar with that. Of course, today you're following the current process, and we're just modifying the process to both take account of the vehicle mile travels changes and also to take account of these new changes regarding the 6 different subjects being covered in the action plans. Next slide. The other chapters are changed in even more minor ways, edits to reflect the updated terminology within the document and to explain VMT as a transportation planning tool, and removing references to CEQA as part of the GMP compliance process, which brings me to my last slide, which is probably an interesting issue for you all to think about. And what that is that because of SB 743 and because of these changes to the growth management implementation guide, we do not anticipate that compliance with the GMP necessarily needs to continue to be a CEQA issue. Some of you may want to talk about compliance with the GMP in a CEQA document, but we don't think you'll be required to. Instead, what you'll be doing for CEQA is looking at roadway VMT as required now under CEQA. You will, though, be continuing to look at level of service and capacity as part of any GMP analysis, and you'll be looking at all of those 6 action plan topics as a GMP analysis, but none of them are strictly CEQA topics. So it'll be a rather, there are already 2 processes, but right now they've been somewhat merged. Now they'll be a little more bifurcated, which I think will actually perhaps provide a little bit more clarity as to which process is which. And it is important to note that your continuing compliance with the GMP and with the action plans, as has always been the case, is a necessary condition for your continuing to receive your return to source funds and access other CCTA programs. So that's not a change. You do still need to continue, of course, to comply with the GMP, but you'll be doing it separately from CEQA. With that, I'll turn it over to Matt, and he'll talk just about what future work we're going to be doing as well.
David. So as far as where we're headed from here, as you can see, we're in the middle of the RTPC review. We've gone to all the TACs, and now we're going to all the policy boards. In March, we'll be taking any comments received from this review process, incorporating those and bringing those to the planning committee and board at CCTA in March. And then we'll be updating that technical document that's a companion to the growth management program implementation guide. We will also be putting together a TAC to guide our VMT mitigation program development. We received a grant from Caltrans last year to put together a countywide VMT mitigation program that would allow VMT increasing projects to fund VMT decreasing projects in the county. So that's kind of a very high level description of what it will do. The framework will be developed over the next year or 2. So we'll be keeping you informed on that. And then as David mentioned or talked about, the action plan updates, those will kick off later this year. Each RTPC updates their own with consultant support that CCTA provides. So all of that might have seemed like a lot to absorb today, but we will be providing resources to kind of walk you through the action plan update process at the TAC level and at the board level. And that'll take place over 2021 and 2022. So you'll be hearing a lot more about the action plans over the next couple of years. But that's our presentation today. We can take any comments or questions you all have.
And commissioner questions, I see Mayor Hudson.
Yeah, Matt, I was listening to this. Every time I hear climate change, I start thinking, okay, what is the extent that we're going to do in this document? Currently, the Air District has paid millions to have every single street in the county record what their, I believe it's particulate matter readings are. Is this in any way involved with that, or is this something that we could pull their information and add it, or do we want to?
I think we're going to put together some examples of what types of things the RTPCs could include in their action plans. It could be different in each area. It could be, goals related to EV charger installations. It could be, just increasing the number of single occupant vehicles that contribute to bringing down overall greenhouse gases. So there's a lot of things it could look like depending on the RTPC, but we will be also looking for data where we can monitor it over the years. That's one of the important parts, is having a way to measure. So selecting measures that are have an easily identified metric, that there's a source for it, would be helpful. So if there is something where the Air Board can supply us data on something, that would be, a good metric.
Well, when you say money, I get interested. And West County is going to get all the AB 617 help they could possibly imagine. But as long as we've got an episodic zone in our RTPC, I'd at least go after something. That's all.
I might just point out quickly that, strictly speaking, the particulate matter you talked about, Mayor Hudson, is not a GHG, a greenhouse gas. It's an air pollutant. And you'll be welcome to cover air pollution or any other items you want to in the action plans. But when we talk about GHGs, we're talking about, of course, CO2, carbon dioxide, and carbon dioxide precursors or equivalents. And particulate matters is a little bit different.
Let me stop you, David. I get it. Methane, nitric oxide, parafluorocarbon, hydrofluoric. I know what they are, but the bottom line is, when you say climate change, particulate matter is the #1 cause of health effects and the #2 cause of climate change in the Bay Area. So if we can get advantage, that's all I'm talking about. If it isn't, don't waste our time.
Thank you.
And the next person I saw was Karen Stepper.
Oh, thank you, Teresa. So having been here a long time, I know that we are a regional transportation committee, now serving on a CCTA, the Contra Costa Transportation Authority. And I hate for that to be lost in all the other issues that we will impact and that we will discuss. But what I heard you saying when you were giving the report, Matt, was, we're still concentrating on, well, we started with just the roads and then we added the bikes and, sorry, I forget what the other one was, transit, of course. And those are naturally transportation. Anybody here who looks at a future issue or a vote or anything else in CCTA's funding, which is what gives us the ability to build some amazing things here in this community, we'll see it as transportation, and I don't want to see that lost. So even when you were talking, I saw those next 3 things as environmental impacts or other descriptions, but not our #1 priority. And I wish it were showing that these are our growth management plan. And then these are our other items which we impact and we'll also be discussing, but they're not tied to funds or penalties or anything like that. They are a part of our responsibility.
Yes, those new, I would say those new non-modal topics, aren't, part of what, our core objective is in terms of delivering transportation. But, in terms of the new paradigm under SB 743, these were things that the state is asking us to bring into our planning documents. So we thought we would address them in the documents, but they're not, the major focus of the growth management program, I would say. The focus of that is land use and transportation. But we wanted to add, reflect the new requirements of SB 743 in the plans, however we could.
Oh, thank you. I understand what you're saying, Matt. When you say it, I don't have a problem with it because it's not our core plan, which is our transportation planning, and that these are the other items that affect it. And what you're telling me is we have to effectuate them because SB 743 says they will be in here. even if they weren't, we'd be discussing them. So I just wanted some way for it not to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but 1, 2, 3 are core objectives, and then our non-modal objectives are the following. So
Yes, I think we can figure out a way to weave that into the way we format the report.
all right, thank you, Matt, very much. It was a great job.
I see that I need to unmute, and Supervisor Anderson had her hand up next.
Yeah, and this is something we've discussed for many years as we've looked at changing what this looks like, but it's level of service. A lot of us still really rely on LOS. And while it's not mandated, do you have any sense on other RTPCs, whether they're going to continue to include that because we've relied on it for such a long period of time? Are you sensing they'll just say, well, that was fun. We'll just move on and look at vehicle miles traveled?
Matt, you're muted.
Traffic engineers in the room will defend the right to use level of service, as much as they can. So yes, we do picture it being used around the county, and even, we're asking for it to be used in most cases to look at the operational side of things. And I'll let David.
Yeah, I was just going to echo that it is actually, it's in the VMT guidance that we've developed, that while VMT has to be used for CEQA, that the RTPCs must all continue to use some delay-based measures as part of the work they do in implementing the GMP. So it's not only that all 4 RTPCs in 5 regions want to do it, it is also actually in the ongoing CCTA requirements that it shall be done.
Good. No, it's that whole discussion to me is so critical from a local planning standpoint.
And it actually, because it's so important to all of you, it's more important than ever that you do have it in your local regulations, because it's not in CEQA anymore. But by having it in the GMP, you are requiring it, and you're requiring its analysis, and you're requiring coordination among the jurisdictions regarding it, which CEQA used to do also. CEQA doesn't do it anymore, but now the GMP continues to do it, which makes the GMP even more important than before.
Well, and so that sort of leads to my second comment / question. We all want to see housing get a little less expensive to build, and people always point to CEQA, but with this additional layer, it appears, since so many of these things are no longer called and required in CEQA, do we see further delays, further challenges, further expense to anyone trying to build a project, because we're going to have this additional over and above and beyond set of rules? Has the development community weighed in on this very much?
Well, Matt, shall I go ahead? Yeah, it actually, Supervisor, should be exactly the opposite. So compliance, compliance, I mean, we really do believe that, and I hope it turns out to be true, and I hope you all will continue to check with us about it. But so there are 2 sides to this. Number one, the VMT analysis is actually simpler to do than the level of service analysis. So the project level review that happens under CEQA should now be simpler to do, because it will focus on VMT, and that is a simpler analysis. The level of service analysis and the other items among those 6 happen at the GMP level, which happen once, if you will, regionally or sub-regionally. Then you just assure compliance of a project with the GMP, and you only have to do any extra analysis if a very large project or general plan amendment is not in compliance with the GMP. But as long as you're in compliance with the GMP, you don't need to do those other analyses, and unless your local jurisdiction is requiring it, you don't have to do the more detailed LOS analysis.
Okay, well, we'll see how that turns out. Great, I appreciate that perspective.
Thank you. Amy Worth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to follow up a little bit on Supervisor Anderson's train of thought. When we started this growth management element in Measure C, first of all, we were one of the first. We were probably the first, right, Matt? Yep. We were the first transportation agency in the state, probably in the country, that did this kind of work. Obviously, when we started this, how many decades ago, much of the development was not infill. It was, outside turning, it was traditional suburban development, turning, greenfield into housing. So now all of our cities are looking at these RENA numbers that will lend themselves and don't have the land for suburban development. And so we'll be looking at infill multi-story housing. And so my question is, and I know that the state law sort of anticipated this, the move from level of service to VMT, this sort of multimodal approach. So is it your sense that we will, this change we will be able to accommodate the kind of development we're going to see in the next decade or so as our cities comply with the RENA requirements in terms of planning, and then of course these developments that are quite different?
Matt, you want me to take that, or?
Sure, David.
Yeah. Let me answer that as best I can, and I hope it's a nuanced question, and I hope I understood it as you intended it. What I would say is that SB 743 does purposely foresee that it wants to empower local jurisdictions to build new development where it is centrally located and easy to serve, and hence where trip lengths are relatively shorter. And it is purposely intending to make it more difficult to approve without findings of overriding consideration. At least it's harder to approve a project that is more dispersed or farther away from a center, which makes people drive further. So Councilmember Worth, to the extent I understood your question, yes, if your jurisdictions are wanting to approve new types of slightly denser housing near a town center, whether it's in downtown Moraga or downtown Walnut Creek or elsewhere, that's exactly what 743 makes easy to do and will pretty much sail through on the transportation side of the environmental review. If any jurisdiction were to want to build large amounts of housing at its very outskirts where commute lengths are going to be much longer, those will be, as intended by the state law, they will be a little bit harder to approve, and one would probably have to find unmitigable impacts and then make findings of overriding consideration.
David, that's very helpful. As always, you do get the nuance and provide the clear answer. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions from committee members before we open it up for public comment? And thank you, Matt and David, for the thorough report. Do we have anyone who would like to make a public comment on this item? Not seeing anyone. So yes, so thank you very much for this report, and to staff for the work that they've been doing on this as well. Before we move on to the next agenda, bye, David.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Before we move on to the next agenda item, I wanted to welcome both from BART, board member Deborah Allen and BART staff Ricky Wells joined after we did our introduction. So welcome. And then we will now move on to agenda item 6A and receive an update on the San Ramon, Bollinger Canyon Road and Iron Horse Trail bike ped overcrossing project. I believe that's Robin.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for having me. I'll be giving a PowerPoint, if I can just share my screen. There we go. Hopefully everybody can see this. So this is just intended to update you from my previous conversation that I had with you. I believe I gave you the update that we were going to be using the CMGC Construction Manager General Contractor approach. And we are now doing that. So we have hired both the designer and the construction manager, who will hopefully become our general contractor. So I think, as we previously discussed, we had already engaged Cowie as our project designer. They're very large bridge bridge design firm out of Denmark with a local office, and they have done all kinds of projects all over the world. We have now through CCTA, they have engaged in the CMGC hiring process and recruited Myers & Sons Shimmick, which is a combination of 2 Northern California contractors. They also have extensive experience both working on GMGC projects as well as on bridge projects. And there's a few examples just shown in this image here. One is a very large cable stay project at the Port of Long Beach, the Gerald Desmond Bridge replacement. They are also have just completed the Transbay Terminal project in San Francisco and are working on the Warm Springs BART West Access Bridge, which is more on the scale that we're talking about. So this was our original concept, which most of you have probably seen. And currently, Cowie is engaged in refining that concept. This is one of their early renderings that they've come up with and is still largely valid. Of course, we're not going to have at-grade crossing when we're all said and done with this. But this incorporates a variety of the elements that they're looking at, including, as you see in the background, maybe having ramps up and down. But we're also looking at stairs near Bollinger Canyon Road to facilitate easy access to people to locations right near the road. Just another rendering, give you a different view out of what we're looking at. Some of the elements we're looking at, of course, include what are we going to do with the landscaping and that ramp process concept. So Cowie is also moving on with looking at how the concepts will fit in on larger scale. So one idea is to try and introduce some curves into either the bridge itself or the approach ramps. So that gives you this kind of image that I've got here, as opposed to the straight line approach, which is very straightforward and effective, but it does give you kind of a very monolithic walls, and it's something that we're going to play around with and see if we can improve upon it. Right now, having looked at various elements, we're likely to have a straight bridge, but may still incorporate some curvature into the approach ramps. Again, a concept of what some of that curvature can do for you. Similar look just from going up the ramp itself. So of course, on a practical level, some of what we're trying to deal with is the fact that the Iron Horse corridor is extensively used as a utility corridor as well. So this just highlights some of those utilities that we're having to deal with. The gray here is just one of the possible concepts that use a curved bridge and curved ramp, and it has to dodge some of the utilities. One of the key ones that you may be aware of is the force main. Central Sand has a force main that runs up most of the length of the trail. That's this item here. Fortunately, it itself is not just a single straight pipe, and so you have to dodge it one way or another, no matter what you do. There's also fiber optics. This line is fiber optic line that's in here. And of course, there's various utilities within Bollinger Canyon Road. And again, they're not always straight lines. So we've got PG&E, and we've got PG&E gas and PG&E electrical conduits that we have to deal with. While we're looking at the major structural issues, we're also looking at other items such as the lighting. So here's a preliminary lighting concept. we're going to play around with quite a few things on that. So I think there's a lot of promise in what can be done with the lighting of the bridge. And of course, one of the concepts that we're also looking at, things we're having to deal with, is how do you handle the railing? We don't want the railing and the fencing to detract from the bridge. So we're giving that a lot of examination. This is one concept which uses a stressed steel mesh. And instead of simply having the stepwise function where you have the minimal railing and then step it up where you need to going over the road, it's tapered down to the approaches. And the different kinds of things that we look at. This one is really emphasize some of the stainless steel mesh that we're looking at closely. This is a bridge in San Diego that incorporated some of the stainless steel mesh concept as opposed to the more standard issue, shall we say, mesh that you see on many bridges, which is really just more like a chain link fence. Of course, some of the concepts we're having to deal with early on, now that we have a contractor on board, is how will we actually build this? Probably going to have to neck down Bollinger Canyon Road and lose a lane while we construct the foundations for the central tower. And this gives you some of the idea of the construction staging. And this is really where, again, the value of having a contractor on board early becomes very important, because we can start looking at the concepts of how does this bridge actually get constructed. And so this concept is built around a steel tower that you can prefabricate, come in place, maybe put it, once you've got the foundation constructed, you can bring in a crane and build that tower and put it up in a night or two. Then you can come in and start putting in the various other elements and start laying the horizontal members across. Again, if we use prefabricated steel elements, this becomes a lot faster during construction. And now we can start weighing the pros and cons of the various elements in terms of the cost of fabrication using, say, steel versus concrete, versus all the cost benefits that come in from rapid assembly of the elements in the field. And then, of course, once you've got the superstructure in place, you start putting in the various other horizontal components of the bridge deck. You can put in the steel cables and progress fairly rapidly with the construction. So we'll have a lot of feedback on how the various elements of the architectural design will play in with the construction and come up with the overall most cost-effective way to achieve the overall goals that we want with this bridge's appearance. And of course, we're also talking with the contractors about what kind of laydown area they need and how this is going to affect traffic on the Iron Horse Trail. So we're looking at a couple of plans where, as shown in red, we're looking to detour traffic off, use existing sidewalks. They may be on the other side of Camino Ramon, to get the bike users by the construction area. So they'll cross Bollinger Canyon Road using the existing crossing and then re-enter through Bishop Ranch, either here or perhaps further up here. We'll probably also have another detour that allows folks to get off and head towards the marketplace area and cross over at City Hall and get back into either the Central Park area or cross back onto the trail in this area. We'll be talking with Sunset Development about use of various areas for construction staging. Bishop Ranch, Sunset Development has a lot going on themselves, so we don't know where that'll be. So, but ideally, we'll get something in close to the trail, maybe a piece of this as well. And we do, of course, have a fairly large area on the trail itself. So that's the gist of where we are at the moment. So we're headed into completing the design process, current design. The next big target really is to come out with a 35% design set, and that'll proceed along, take about a full year to complete the design. And then hopefully we'll be able to transition straight in construction, and something on the order of 2 years for construction. That, if you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them if I can.
Thank you, Robin. And I'm sure you're clicking it now, but if you could stop sharing your screen, we'll be able to see it.
No, I need it. I need it.
All right.
Yes.
I can share back. I anticipate somebody might want to see something.
Dave.
Yeah, Robin, I hadn't noticed this before, but on the next to last slide, you show red lines for the temporary, I assume, pedestrian bike path. And what caught my attention is when you get to Bollinger from BR3, you're on the east side of Camino Ramon. Yeah, and now what you show them crossing on the other side.
Yeah. This is really was just a quick sketch that was done, and I'm not sure how we'll actually encourage people to go. And the truth is, of course, they'll be on the public right of way. They can go wherever they want. So I personally
Well,
would.
there's no sidewalk, I don't think, on that side. I can't remember. But the problem is, are we going to do a diagonal, or I mean, are we got?
No. They'll either cross up at Bishop Drive.
Yeah,
or cross in here and then go straight across, or they could cross through here also and go down this way.
Okay.
I would like, when the time comes, I see putting up signage to make the preferred route as clear as possible to any trail user who's coming down and isn't familiar with the city. And I think the farther up here that we get back onto the trail, the more I would encourage people to just stay on this side of the road and then cut through. Part of that depends on what may be going on what's labeled 3.
Yeah.
It's possible this area could be subject to construction, in which case we'd want people to stay away from that as well and cut down through here.
Oh boy.
It'll be busy.
Any other questions or comments from committee members? And then so we'll move to, I don't see any hands, and I've scrolled up and down even with the shared screen. Are there any members of the public who would like to make a comment? Not seeing anyone. Robin, thank you very much for that update, and very exciting. I mean, it's great that you come back and update us. So thank you for doing that.
Happy to update you later.
Great, thank you. Okay, so now we will move on to item 6B, and we will receive an update on East Bay Regional Park District proposed request to redistribute Measure J funds. And I'm not going to read the whole item, so Colin will enlighten us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So sharing screen here, can you confirm that it's showing on your side? Great, thank you. So I'll keep this short and sweet, but I'm happy to go into as much detail as people are interested. So over here on the left-hand side, you have project that ends in 30, and below it, you have the project that ends in 31. And so the top one is the Iron Horse Trail. The bottom one is the Lafayette Moraga Trail. And moving over here to the right, you can see what was appropriated by CCTA and the actual project costs coming in lower. And so there could be a potential savings here. However, the proposal in front of us being summarized today as an informational item is that this one below came in actually higher actual costs than was appropriated. So the proposal by East Bay Regional Parks is to move that money from the one that had the savings to the one that came in higher. So there's no additional new funds for appropriation request as part of this proposal. So happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from committee members?
Yeah. Teresa, do you want questions or comments or?
Questions or comments, committee
Okay,
member Worth?
Well, first of all, okay, I'll just jump in. First of all, I really want to thank, we are so fortunate to have the Park District as stewards of these magnificent trails. They are heavily used, especially this last year. They're have been used a lot. And I think that this is such an important part of our Measure J program. And so, and I'm pleased that we're fortunate that the Iron Horse repaving project came under budget when in fact we know along the Lafayette Moraga Trail, there are a lot of trees that work very hard to produce those roots and to the soil movement. And so I am very pleased that we're able to utilize the cost savings from the Iron Horse to complete the repair of the Lafayette Moraga Trail. So I'm very grateful for this.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions for Colin? I'm not seeing any movement to turn on mics. So are there any members of the public who would like to make a comment on this item? And Darlene, Colin, could we pull down the report or the PowerPoint? Thank you. I'm not seeing any hands raised. And so again, thank you, Colin, for that report. And committee member Worth, thank you for pointing out that this is great that we can utilize those funds and that East Bay Regional Park District is a great steward for our trails. So thank you. And we will move on to item 6D, which is to receive an update on County Connection Transit Service community meetings. This item is also an information only item, no action required. And so it is Ruby.
So I'll actually be filling in for Ruby on this item.
Okay.
So good afternoon. So over the past 2 months, we've been conducting public outreach to get feedback on our 3 service reduction scenarios. We held a series of 4 virtual public hearings last month, each of them focused on different parts of our service area. We did not have any attendees at the La Marinda one, but we did have about 8 or so at the one that was focused on the southern part of our service area, so Danville and San Ramon. While we didn't receive any formal public comments at those hearings, we did receive 12 written comments on the proposals, and the ones specific to the SWAT area were opposition to the elimination of routes 95X and 96X under scenario 3, opposition to the elimination of the Orinda Community Center loop on Route 6, and then concern about reduced frequency on Route 35 to the Windermere area. And so given our current financial projections, staff is planning to recommend the implementation of scenario 1. So this is going to be the least amount of cuts, and it's actually very similar to our current service levels, which we've been operating on a temporary basis since August due to COVID. And then in response to the comment we received, we are including a revision to the original plan that would retain service to the Orinda Community Center on Route 6. So all those comments that we did receive either aren't applicable to this scenario or have been addressed. And so if this is approved, the earliest that this plan would be implemented is this summer. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Melody. Are there any questions or comments from committee members? Committee member Worth.
Thank you very much. Melody, thank you very much for that report. And I think, I know that we are in challenging times right now with ridership numbers, and we want to be able to provide the services. County Connection is working very hard in terms of implementing all the safety protocols for riders, both in terms of regular routes and paratransit. And, I know also County Connection provides a lot of school transportation. So I imagine, I mean, I know County Connection is also working on that. When schools reopen on campus, that will be another piece of what we're doing. But I just want to thank you for, looking ahead and for going out to the community, for giving people the opportunity to really comment on those changes. And the good news is keep shopping, everyone, because our transit resources in large part come from sales tax revenue. So thank you. Thanks, Melody.
Thanks, Amy. Any other comments or questions from the committee? Okay, are there any members of the public who would like to make a comment on this item? Not seeing anyone. Again, Melody, thank you very much for that report and for the public engagement. Thank you. So moving.
You're on mute.
There you go. I was going to try to get it before somebody had to say it. Moving on to item 6E, approve SWAT records retention policy. This is an action item and Lisa is going to lead off on this.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of SWAT. As all of you know, last November, the Contra Costa Transportation Authority updated the records management retention program. They passed resolution number 20-31-A, which revises the records retention program. During the January 2020 SWAT meeting, or I'm sorry, January 2021 SWAT meeting, we articulated to all of you that included in the authority's revised records retention program is a requirement that the regional transportation planning committees adopt their own records retention policy. After much discussion at our January 2021 meeting, it was recommended that SWAT members, Chair Geringer, Member Sauce, and staff, SWAT admin staff, meet with authority staff to talk about this issue and come to some resolution. So we have met with the authority staff. We met with authority legal counsel with the new executive director, Tim Hale. John was also included in the meeting. That meeting took place on January 12th. It was a very productive meeting. But at the conclusion of the meeting, it was decided that SWAT should accept the Transportation Authority's records management program and use the records management program to adhere to a records retention policy. So in your staff report this afternoon is a number of documents, but on page 182 is the authority's records retention schedule. There are a number of items within that records retention schedule that are not required of SWAT. SWAT, we are not required to maintain personnel records or financial records. Those are items that are required by the authority. But in the planning section of the records management or the records retention schedule, there are documents and instructions on how to retain the records retention for growth management compliance items, regional transportation planning committee items. And so it is the recommendation of SWAT staff members today that SWAT accept the authority's records retention schedule, and SWAT admin staff will start adhering to that schedule. With that concludes my presentation. Chair Geringer or Councilmember Sauce may have some additional comments to provide as they were also at the meeting, but we are looking for SWAT to approve using the authority's records retention schedule. Thank you.
Okay, so Renata, did you want to make any additional, or committee member Sauce, did you want to make any additional comments?
Yes, thank you, Lisa. That was a very good report and a great summary. We did have a very good discussion. I think a lot of issues were raised that I think CCTA Council is going to take back and think about. But for the time being, I think we concluded that the path of least resistance and the most efficient and effective thing to do would be for us to just go ahead and adopt the CCTA policy And the one point I did want to make is that, and Lisa, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there was an agreement also at that meeting that we would rely on CCTA Council for advice on implementation of the policy. And two is that given that San Ramon is maintaining the SWAT documents, that if there were any questions about the intersection between the CCTA document retention policy and the San Ramon city policies, that that Lisa would get assistance from CCTA Council and San Ramon Council to work that out, to make sure that that there is, you know, appropriate separation, if you will, between the policies if there are any inconsistencies. So I again, there are some issues that CCTA needs to work through, but for now, I think this is the best way to go, is for us to go ahead and adopt it, because the CCTA board did instruct staff to obtain each RTPC's adoption. So we can cooperate by doing that today.
In fact,
Okay, go ahead.
before you leave that, Teresa, were there any other suggestions that both of you or either of you made to CCTA, or is it just that the help of their attorney?
Well, I mean, my suggestion was that we didn't need to do anything,
right,
because we are already bound by the policy. So we went around and around with that for a while. So that was one suggestion. And that was only for the RTPCs that are not themselves JPAs, and because they have, you know, a separate legal existence and more resources than we do. No, that was the only suggestion, but that didn't. I was not persuasive, and so I think that by just confirming today that we are subject to it, I think we get where we need to be, and I think that, I mean, Lisa, you didn't seem to have concerns about implementation being particularly burdensome or difficult, and I just want to confirm that.
No, it will not be a challenge for us to, the challenge that we will have is that SWAT has a website where we host all of our meeting agendas and meeting packets. We do need to update that website. And so we are taking a draft RFP, or request for proposals, to the SWAT TAC either in February or March, and then we will come to SWAT with a request to approve an expenditure that will be funded by all the SWAT cities to update the SWAT website, so that that website has the ability to house all of the documents. So that is the only other remaining item that we need to follow up on.
Second.
Wait, let me just.
We'll have a few, go ahead, Councilmember Worth.
Either one, or Garrett, okay. First of all, I really want to thank our staff and subcommittee for meeting with the authority. And I think this group has a clear understanding that we are a subset of the Transportation Authority. We are not a separate JPA as two of the other RTPCs are. And so therefore we are. And I think, as I was thinking about this, and I know we have done a lot of thought and discussion, is it, you know, you kind of have three elements. One, we have the establishment of the record. So we have the process we follow to document meetings in terms of agenda, staff reports, and then we have minutes, and we have all the, you know, materials that we certainly put out for meetings. And then the second piece is preserving those documents. And, you know, and then the third piece is really, and I think this is the fundamental issue, the responsible agency. And I think what our position has been, and it seems that adopting this policy is consistent with that, that we are a part of CCTA that is the responsible agency, not SWAT. I mean, we will collect our resources and we will put them in the proper way that the CCTA policy directs, but in the end, the, CCTA is the responsible agency. So it sounds like, it seems what I hear you saying, that adopting this in that context today is completely consistent with what we have been expressing in terms of our view of the proper maintenance of the records, our responsibility, and the authority's responsibility. So I see you guys nodding. So I assume that's great. Okay.
And Karen?
I just would like to say that, it's come back to us several times, and each time it became really clear, I think, to everybody here that we are part of CCTAs. But I have to express my appreciation to the subcommittee for talking to CCTA and making them look at these issues again in a way that's our subcommittee's concerns. I think you did a great job of writing them. I think taking care of how you transfer these to scans and then are not responsible for keeping the original documents. I can tell you I'm in a mess somewhere else because that didn't happen. And so I appreciate, the format, the simplicity of it, and the fact that by having that extra meeting, you made it very clear to CCTA that we are adopting their policy and they are responsible for it. And of course, many of you are on that body, so I'm not worried about it, but I do appreciate the order in which this has happened, that we've taken a view of it that has made it clear to them that they are responsible for it. Great.
Yes, Renata.
Madam Chair, unless there's more discussion, I'm prepared to make a motion.
Okay, I didn't see any other hands up, and so we can make the motion and then I'll go to public comment. So, and Mayor Hudson, thank you. So we have
we have an anticipatory second.
Yeah, right. Renata, you're on.
Dave, I was going to say that Member Hudson will be in charge of implementation of the document retention policy. Did you second that part?
You'll be sorry.
Thank you. Yes, the reason that we don't jump ahead in the order of things, besides, all those rules, but are there any members of the public who would like to make a comment on this item? Okay, Darlene, would you do a roll call vote?
We haven't had a motion yet, though.
I thought you did.
You made the motion and I did the second.
Oh, I haven't moved.
Okay.
I was just joking.
So committee member Sauce. Committee member
Okay, here's
Sauce.
my real motion. A two-part motion to confirm that SWAT is subject to and bound by the CCTA document retention policy, and that SWAT will rely on the advice of CCTA counsel on the application and implementation of the policy.
All right, I can second that, Hudson.
Okay, now we have a motion by committee member Sauce and a second by committee member Hudson. Did I see a hand raised for discussion?
She's just waving.
No. I just wanted to, first of all, I think that two-part motion is really helpful. And I just wondered if there was a way to put in a little phrase as a subcommittee of the Transportation Authority, wherever it is. I think it's just, I know we've established that in the discussion and the past record, but I'm wondering if we might want to add that too.
And I will amend the first part as follows. Member Worth, I think that's a great suggestion. To confirm that SWAT as an advisory subcommittee to CCTA is subject to and bound by the CCTA document retention policy.
Great.
Okay. And is the maker of the second?
Yeah, I'll second.
Amenable?
It's okay. It's not great, but it's okay.
I'm sorry, excuse me. Question?
Yes.
We're a regional transportation authority committee. So I'm not sure advisory is the word that should be in there.
Okay, that's fine. I'll strike advisory. Just
use the language that set us up legally, which is regional transportation. So.
And just affirming that is a component or a subset or however we want to do it of the CCTA. Because that's really what we've been maintaining.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Okay.
Anna's going to take back her motion. You guys keep this up.
Well, you could say regional committee of the Transportation Authority of the CCTA, and then that kind of says it.
Okay. So Member Sauce, would you read your motion again, just to make sure that we're all clear? I see the second shaking his head, but I think it would be helpful.
All right, so the first part is amended to say confirm that SWAT as an RTPC of CCTA is subject to, and then the rest is the same.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Andy, for the acronym definition. So are there any additional comments or questions? If not, Darlene, would you do the roll call vote?
Yeah, SWAT committee member Anderson,
Yes.
SWAT committee member Hudson,
Yeah.
SWAT committee member Worth,
Aye.
SWAT committee member Sauce,
Yes.
Vice Chair Stepper,
Yes.
and Chair Geringer.
Yes. And thank you all. And again, thank you to Renata for first bringing this up in Candace's office in the before times, and and for helping us get to this point. So.
Chair Geringer, can I just add my thanks to Lisa? Thank you so much for your patience and for drafting a policy, and then and just sticking with us. So really appreciate your patience and commitment to this. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Definitely. Thank you, Lisa. So then item number 7 is written communications. Are there any questions or comments on any of the items that were in your packet? Okay. Any members of the public who would like to make a public comment on item number 7? I don't see any hands up.
Yes.
Oh,
hi, this is Jennifer Paul.
Oh,
Sorry, there's no
thank you.
raised hand.
Oh, okay. Well, there you are.
Great.
Okay,
thank
Jennifer,
you.
welcome.
Thank you and good afternoon. I'm Jennifer Paul. I'm from Lafayette, and I sent a letter today to your committee outlining the reasons that I oppose amending the gateway constraint policy to include an addition of a short link southbound lane on Pleasant Hill Road as part of the proposed Terraces of Lafayette project. I'm just going to summarize and ask you to refer to my letter, which has details and supporting documents. But first, it's unprecedented to make an amendment based solely on one project. The 315 unit Terraces project is currently involved in a lawsuit and should not be the only reason behind this amendment. Second, the trap lane is contrary to the gateway constraint policy. This policy was written to limit the impact to residents and discourage more single occupancy cars. The amendment to add the trap lane may do just the opposite. It's been studied several times, and as recently as 2020, a report from TJKM stated that, quote, adding more capacity for southbound through movement at Deer Hill Road does have the potential to increase speeds upstream and attract more drivers onto the corridor. Initial simulations using sim traffic suggest that this would be the case. And as such, TJKM stated, the proposed lane may violate both the letter and the spirit of the gateway constraint policy. Third, according to the Loma Action Plan, due to the fact that the Terraces project would generate more than 100 net new peak hour vehicle trips, the City of Lafayette and the Loma Program Management Committee should have notified neighboring regional transportation planning committees at the time of the application to get their input, but not just now, after the project has been approved. And lastly, I believe that input from the community should be considered regarding this incredibly important proposed amendment. The meeting today and future meetings that have this proposed trap lane on the agenda should be posted in various ways, such as on Nextdoor and via the area city communications. Please consider placing an A-frame board with notices at the intersection of Pleasant Hill Road, Deer Hill, and Stanley for any future meeting involving this intersection, as it is a route of regional significance. Thank you for your time and attention to this important matter.
Thank you, Jennifer. Are there any questions for the speaker? Seeing none, I will share what Lisa had put into chat. The letter was received and has been distributed or will be very shortly distributed to SWAT committee members and the SWAT TAC. So thank you, Jennifer, for attending the meeting and making that comment.
Thank you.
Any other public comments on item 7? We'll pause just a second. So moving on to item number 8 and a discussion or update on the next agenda. And so Lisa?
Yes, Madam Chair, the next agenda, so far we have an update from the Transportation Authority on the Contra Costa Countywide Vision Zero framework. So Colin Clark from the authority will provide that update to SWAT. We also may have, and we'll confirm this with Hisham Noimi from the Transportation Authority, we may have an update on the strategic expenditure plan or the revenue reduction policy that has gone forward to the authority. There may be an update at the March meeting. Likely it's going to the authority in March, so it may come to SWAT in April, but we'll keep you posted. So far, those are the items that we have on the agenda for March 1st.
Okay, thank you. Do any committee members have items that you can all go ahead, Mayor Hudson, and then Council Member Sauce?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I want to repeat it. Amy Wirtz said shop more. And she could have added San Ramon, but she didn't. I will for her.
Okay. And Renata, did you have, or Councilmember Sauce?
Yeah, yes, I have a question on timing and that, and whether do we have any sense of when the transmittal by the LPMC of the matter regarding the gateway constraint is going to come before this board.
So I don't know if he wants to come on or any of the LMPC staff, but my understanding is that the staff report and transmittal to now that Andy wrote it, I'm going to discombobulate it. But anyway, to SWAT and the other RTPCs is in the works. And so I don't have a date certain, but should be coming back shortly. I did ask about that late last week and got an update this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so any other additional comments for the good of the order? Very quickly seeing none, no. Thank you all very much. And thank you everyone for the great presentations. The meeting is adjourned until Monday, our next meeting, Monday, March 1st, 2021 at 3 p.m. and via Zoom. So everybody stay safe and healthy, and we will see you in a bit. Bye.
Bye.